Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Eva. Thank you, Mara, for having me here. As Eva just said, we are working with the Birsa Museum in an exhibition that will happen from September until December this year. It's a huge project, I have to say. We have been working with several of the big museums in Spain, and we convinced them to launch some of the most beautiful pieces. And it came as kind of an opportunity that Eva was creating the wonderful exhibition that you have here right now in this museum about Grosvalds, because there is this beautiful connection that allows us to explain on one side what was or part of the fascination of Grosvalds and other artists, European artists from Northern Europe, from Eastern Europe, and from America as well, to have this kind of a thrill with Spanish art during that period. And also it enables us to present the exhibition project that we will be doing here. So many of the things that we're going to be seeing, that we're going to see here, we will see, or you will have the opportunity to see in Birsa from September, the actual paintings. Because the exhibition that we are going to bring forth brings many of these topics to the spotlight. So, first thing first, I don't usually put any labels in my presentations. I don't want people to start thinking about the size, the technique, the name of the authors, and also because that allows me to unveil at some point who's painting what, and come with some surprises. However, I have my email at the end of the presentation, so if someone wants the whole list of works that we've seen, they can just email me, and I'll be sure to send the whole list or the presentation with the labels. Okay, so let's see. Great. First thing first. Now, this is our hero, our local hero, and by him we see this other guy. This is the famous Xavier Gosset, an illustrator, and we will see later a part of a very, very, very important group of artists, not only Spanish artists, but artists that in fact pushed forward modern painting and avant-garde painting in an extremely, extremely radical way. So this exhibition is about how this group of artists thought and about what happened in their country, so that we, after a quite lame 19th century Spanish art painting, Spanish painters became so incredibly famous throughout the beginning of the 20th century. We are 1910 here, okay? This is 1905, this is 1903. Mir Iskustva, if I say it correctly, and next to it, Jugend, one of the two most influential art magazines in Europe. The painting to the left is Ignacio Zuloaga. It might look as a Goyesque painting. In fact, it's very modern. We'll see why. To the right, our very dear Anglada Camarasa. Yes, one of those great painters that Grosvalds, and not only Grosvalds, looked for in Paris. Back in the day, 1910, Anglada Camarasa was, together with Mr. Ignacio Zuloaga, was probably the most searched for artist in Paris, and the most powerful one as well. He had, back in 1910, when Grosvalds met him in the 1910s, he was worshipped in Argentina, in Russia, in Brazil, in the US, and in Europe. And he sold each painting for a fortune. We'll see why. Next to him, Ignacio Zuloaga, probably the only painter that was as powerful as Anglada. As powerful in the world. We're not talking about only the European or the Spanish environment, but the world. George Grosz, the famous expressionist painter German, once said, in the First World War, Zuloaga was as powerful as Picasso was in the Second World War. We will talk about Picasso as well. Why? Because this is 1905, this is 1903, and this is 1907. Okay? So, as much as it doesn't look like a Spanish painting, the topics are very much Spanish, but we will look into that. And the path of Picasso until he gets to painting the Demoiselle d'Avignon is quite clearly a Spanish path. I have to explain what this Spanish path means. 1910, a huge exhibition happens or two huge exhibitions happen in New York. These two paintings are presented there. The painting to your right, Ignacio Zuloaga. The painting to the left, the world-famous Joaquin Sorolla, the other one. Of the four greats of Spanish painting, in that precise moment, the missing one, Joaquin Sorolla. They painted there, and it was a huge political fuss, far beyond the artistic realm. Why? Because there in New York, back in the day, in the Hispanic Society of New York, not only the supremacy of the greatest Spanish painter was on stake, but most importantly, the idea of Spain itself. And this huge conflict is where these artists develop their careers, in the conflict of white Spain and black Spain. What is the conflict in between white Spain and black Spain? It's the conflict in between how Spain looks and how Spain feels. We will look into that. And most importantly, is the conflict in between, should painters be patriotic and show a nice image of their country? Or should they be true to themselves and paint what they really feel like? Huge, huge, huge conflict there. And we will see how these two worlds of the black Spain and the white Spain come to happen. Of course, we think that this is a 19th century, beginning of the 20th century debate. We are still prisoners of the idea that we have, of the stereotypes that we have on countries. And Spain, it's a country that sells a certain stereotype. This is not new. This comes from the 19th century. And we're going to go back 100 years, or almost 200 years from now, 100 years from then. This is one of the first Spanish landscapes, or appropriately landscapes, to be called so. It's the landscape of Madrid during San Isidro. Francisco de Goya, showing the city, the capital of the empire, capital city of the empire, and bucolic scene. There you go. Sunny, festive, Spanish, all good. Shortly after, the French invaded Spain, and more or less invaded, and there was a huge conflict there, the War of Independence for Spaniards, Napoleonic Wars, Spain for the French. The country was devastated, but something incredible happened after the war. The French fell in love with the exotic world that they found in Spain and started promoting it. As a matter of fact, the Spain that we have in our minds, it's a French construct. It's a French idea. Throughout Europe, we had all kinds of folkloric things. But Spain was focused by France as a contrast, just the other side of the mountains, to their very civilized society. They are the people of reason, and just there, behind the mountains, you had exotic Europe. Just there. What is exotic Europe? It's a beautiful idea, very beautiful idea, that is more or less founded by writers, such as Marimé, with famous Carmen, with painters and editorial projects, such as these exotic types of Mont Blanchard, and this other guy, Francais de Toledo. This is all French painting, 19th century. And these paintings were sent to France, and in France they built up this idea of exotic Spain. So what do we have in exotic Spain? We have folklore, we have people that are not as civilized, but are normally happy. The famous Good Savage by Rousseau was all there. They have adventure, they have a place to go in their Grand Tour, which is outside of their very polished bourgeois cities. And you also have a beautiful medieval Arab palace there that serves as the scenery for all your dreams, all your European dreams of the exotic. You see, to the left, David Roberts, to the right, Spanish painters starting to understand this. This is General Pérez Villamil. He generated a whole catalog of monumental Spain, which is more fantasy than document. Actually, this doesn't exist, really, but it kind of transpired the idea of Spain as an exotic place. What are we missing? Because right now, you see, we are coming with all of the ideas or the preconceived ideas that we have about Spain, right? Whenever I talk about this in Europe, people start filling the gaps, like, okay, that's Spain that I know, the Alhambra, that's Sevilla, that's flamenco, that's, you see? Of course, depicting a country is depicting two things. Depicting the country, its landmarks, and depicting its people, especially when its people behave specifically as types. And thus, we start building the Spanish types, the Carmen, the bandolero, the bullfighter, the picador, the dancer, the gypsies, all of them. We built a whole gallery because the French, the German, in fact there's a painting here at Birsa showing romantic Spain as well, because people in Europe wanted to believe that down there in the southwestern corner there was this world. Was it true? Not so much. Okay, Eugenio Lucas, next, another beautiful landscape, and here we see the beautiful light is Muri's caravans next to the sea. The sea appears for the first time, okay? And in 1872, a group of very talented painters, one of which was very acclaimed internationally, Mariano Fortuny, go to Granada. And there, all of them, which were all of them quite talented and quite professional, built this whole world from inside out. It was not the French, but rather them showing how Granada looked. Granada became, of course, after Washington Irving's novel, became one of the main landmarks of Spanish culture. So they went there and they started developing this very modern approach, modern in terms of based on light painting, very modern approach on Granada. Of course, you have Fortuny doing traditional, picturesque, historicistic painting. Fortuny, this is a finished painting. To the right, Fortuny doing a very, or delivering a very, very, very modern approach, even for French Impressionism. What was Fortuny's take? We are going to end the Spanish tradition of painting dark, and we are going to start being painters of light. Okay? It's a very, very, very important switch. Because if you think about Spanish painting and Spanish school of painting, our Goyas, our Velázquez, our Zurbarán, El Greco, they are all quite dark, right? We can agree on that. It's a dark school of painting. Fortuny was trying to shift the position of Spain into a sun-light landscape painting. And he did that by working on this idea of Spain. These are the colleagues of Fortuny there, Martín Rico, Madrazo, some examples. And here, we have something interesting. In 1986, this very, 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 very talented painter appeared. He was from Valencia, and he started following on the steps of Fortuny and his group. These two are two very early paintings by Joaquin Sorolla. Although we barely recognize him, because that could very well be Fortuny, and that could very well be Martín Rico. What happens with Sorolla is that he's so talented that very quickly he transcends the scene. He transcends the picturesque. And he becomes probably the first radical Spanish modern painter by only painting a very radical plenarism and painting more and more abstract and looking more and more real. This is kind of the miracle of Sorolla. And whenever we have the opportunity to have here Sorolla, you will acknowledge what an incredibly talented painter he is. What happened with Sorolla is that, talented and successful as he was, he completely shifted the image of Spain. We had folklore, we had exotism, we had Arab past, we had flamenco, we had bullfight, we had everything. But Sorolla established something else which today is probably Spain's biggest landmark. Sun. Spain is the country of sun. And it was always like that. I mean, like in the 17th century, it was also very sunny. But Sorolla brought it forth. And this idea of bringing forth sun and depicting these scenes turned Sorolla into the great herald of official Spain. Why? Because they couldn't dream about a painter that could transmit a better image of a country. Spain, which was regarded as a retarded, savage, uncivilized country, suddenly became the place where Europe wanted to be. It was optimistic, it was sunny, it was fresh, it was young, it was powerful, it was everything. Indeed, Sorolla learned a lot about northern painters, Edelfelt, Zorn, we can name them all. However, he had also this Fortuny background as to create paintings that really looked like open windows, and that was unbeatable back in the day. So, what was Spain in the 1900s? Spain was a sunny, colorful, optimistic, fresh vacation place next to the sea. What is Spain today? For all of you. What is Spain for Europe? Just that. You see how the whole thing came together. 1898, Spain loses its last colonies, and that was quite traumatic. It was quite traumatic because all of this sunshine and everything was also held by this glorious empire. The empire was over, Spain was forced to look on itself, and things were not as nice whenever you looked at them closely. Indeed, the country was in great peril and in a very complicated situation. Half of it starving, half of it empty, abandoned, quite savage. Go back again 200 years. Francisco de Goya. Remember our San Isidro landscape of Madrid? Yeah? This is a couple of, like 20 years later. This is the Romería de San Isidro, the San Isidro festivity. And this kicks off a tradition that we could backtrack even further of the Black Spain. What is the Black Spain? The Black Spain is the idea that as sunny as it is, Spain has a very, very dark tradition. And the dark tradition comes as a very dark folklore, as a constant acknowledgement of death, as a very compassionate religion, in terms of not compassionate in feeling compassionate, but in feeling the pain, a very painful religion. And as a matter of fact, whenever you look close to every Spanish tradition, that is there. Whenever you look into proper flamenco, whenever you look into bullfighting, whenever you look into our Easter traditions, it is. So, Goya, back in the day, of course Goya is Goya, but Goya back in the day was already acknowledging in that very same place when we saw that beautiful landscape of Madrid and the empire and people having fun there and everything so bucolic. At the same time, these creepy, dark, moody environments. Goya. Remember Pharamond Blanchard? The guy that we saw at the beginning, the French guy? He was painting at the same time this. So also the French acknowledged that, and they started doing paintings of both realities, the sunny, festive, happy folkloric, and the dark and gloomy. Remember Doedang, that dance in front of this Arab palace? Easter in Sevilla. Remember that beautiful sunset at caravans, Arabs? This is Eugenio Lucas. Yeah, Eugenio Lucas is probably the greatest hire of Francisco de Goya. You can see that clearly. This looks like Francisco de Goya. And it's a dispute in the middle of a religious celebration. Interestingly, Eugenio Lucas, this painter, brought or worked as Cicerone and was a great friend of a very famous painter from France that came to paint to Spain and was very impressed. Of course, there you go, Manet acknowledging Black Spain. We can forget about the heroic looks of the bullfighters. There you saw what bullfighting is really about, a big possibility of someone getting killed in front of everyone, a dead bullfighter. as clean and as polished as Manet is acknowledging Black Spain. So, let me introduce you to another of our important characters. This is Ensor, that you can read back there, down there, and this is Darío de Regoyos. Darío de Regoyos, another painter that we will have in our exhibition, and I'm very happy to have him because he's quite important. He was a very, very modern European Impressionist painter. This is him. That's Brussels, and that's outside of Paris. Completely obsessed with impressionistic parameters. How light hits, the subjective image of light, the capturing of a certain moment, you name it. Everything impressionist, he was there, raised together with Ensor and the rest of the Belgian painters since a very young age, although he was Spanish. 1888, he comes to Spain, his mother dies, he comes to Spain and he travels the country with a Belgian poet, Verhaeren, and they start publishing their ideas. That trip changes Regoyos, and he starts thinking about being more symbolic when it came to painting, and not only so impressionist. I don't know if I'm more or less making myself clear. He starts composing rather than receiving an impression. And that compositions that obsessed him are always about the very dark soul of Spain. At the same time, Verhaeren does this poetic anthology about their travels. They travel from northern Spain all the way back to Madrid. And there's something interesting here. We are already focusing on other areas of Spain that are not Andalusia. That's a hugely important thing, because as much as Black Spain is also in Andalusia, and we can acknowledge that in the music of Falla or the poems from García Lorca, it's difficult to overcome the sheer brightness of Sevilla, of Córdoba, of Granada. However, whenever you move out of Andalusia, this whole dark spirit comes to life much easier, or much clearly, especially for painters. So, Regoyos started focusing on this tradition, and he started depicting these dead horses, which are a symbol of Black Spain. Why? Because the horse was always a symbol of power, and in Spain, the white horse was a symbol of the country. It was always like that. It was for Titian, it was for Rubens when he painted the Spanish monarchy, it was for Velázquez, it was for everyone like that. They always ride their beautiful white horses, which were a pride of Spain, the white horses of Spain. So whenever we are starting to see dead horses, we are starting to realize how that loss of the colonies is affecting people. That whole decadence of the country. Dead horses were everywhere because we used to bullfight without putting an armor on the dead horse. So the moment the bull hit, the horse was dead or close to death. So you found these dead horses, and he was so impressed, he turned them into a symbol. And he also published that book. That's an 1898 book, exactly the year we lose the colonies. And that year, Regoyos is showing his works not in Madrid, because in Madrid they didn't like this image, and that was part of the fuss. They preferred the Sorolla bright take of Spain, so he showed them in Barcelona. And that's interesting. He shows them in a place we will visit later, which is a very important restaurant for art, for history of art, I'd say, which is called Quatre Gats, which means the four cats. Okay? He has this exhibition, and he publishes this book with this title, which is going to become incredibly important in terms of symbol, the Black Spain. And this is Regoyos after Black Spain. You see how he's able to very clearly symbolize the difference in between progress and us not even touching. You see? And he's able to develop these incredible compositions, as much as he's an impressionist painter, of a great symbolic charge. This one is called Holy Friday in Castilla. This one, and the titles are starting to become very important, is called For the Dead. And we get to 1898. Again, 1898. That year, another very talented painter, and a painter of which I'm very fond because I used to run his museum, Ignacio Zuloaga, gets to Segovia. He had been painting in Sevilla, he studied in Paris, he was based in Paris, married to a Parisian lady, and he was quite successful because he was quite talented, and he was studying back then in the Académie de la Palette. Académie de la Palette, interestingly, was also the academy to which Grossvalls, if I understand correctly, went when he went to Paris, because the Académie de la Palette was many of the students there and many of the teachers, but many of the students were Spanish. In fact, many of these painters that I'm talking about developed their careers from the Académie de la Palette. Gervais was there, Puy de Chavannes, or afterwards Jacques-Émile Blanche, right? Great friend of his. And this young fellow got to, he was in Paris looking for style, kind of a post-impressionistic, modernistic painter, and then he goes to see his uncle in Segovia. Remember what we said about shifting from Andalusia to other areas of Spain? Well, Zuloaga goes to Segovia, and there he discovers a world in which all of the topics of the Black Spain really incarnated. Meaning that he didn't have to bring up anything. He could just paint the people there, and that served as the perfect symbol of Black Spain. Why was he so interested in Black Spain? Well, mainly because he knew Black Spain from within. He was from northern Spain, but he had great knowledge of flamenco. We've seen José with a guitar, right? At the beginning, we've also seen Regoyos with a guitar. I mean, I could do an exhibition only of Spanish painters with guitars. It's kind of a fixed idea there, but Zuloaga was indeed very knowledgeable, and most importantly, he was a bullfighter. So he knew pretty well how bullfighting looked and how bloody and how deadly it was. So he was very interested in that Black Spain experience. And in Segovia, suddenly, he found this world that he could exploit to explain Black Spain. Interestingly, this painting is shown 1899 in the Salon National in France. It's called My Cousins and My Uncle, just like that. And the European critics go crazy about Zuloaga. So crazy that MÄKSLAS, in a very, very, very famous article, shows this painting and only titles with this painting, his only comment is, Spain finally awakens. Now, there are different things that MÄKSLAS and the rest of the painters saw in Zuloaga and saw in this painting. Most noticeably, they could finally recognize what the things that had done, that had made the Spanish school so great. They could see Goya here, they could see Velázquez here, they could see even El Greco here, and the following painters of Zuloaga. So, and they could see that the topics were the same. Of course, I don't want to make a very long lecture, but if I put here any of the dwarfs of Velázquez, or any of the black paintings of Goya, or any of the saints of Rivera, we'll immediately recognize that he belongs to the same school. So finally, I hired to that school. See? And interestingly as well, the whole of Europe backed Zuloaga, while the whole of Spain and other places like America backed Sorolla. Zuloaga was hated in Spain, not because he was a bad painter, but because he was anti-patriotic. 1898. Okay, here we have our heroes. Now we have set the record for our Black Spain, White Spain contest. Here, our dear Joaquin Sorolla and Ignacio Zuloaga next to him. There you go. And here is the struggle, or here begins the struggle, of which most of the great modern artists drank in order to evolve their painting. Here, Sorolla, a master of light. Yes, her face is in the shadow, but you can clearly see how modern he can be in his whole composition. Zuloaga. It's Zuloaga, but it would have been Goya very easily. Of course. But don't be deceived by Zuloaga. It's a very modern painting as well. In fact, it's all staged. The background, it's a stage. You see, it's a scenery. It's completely flat. And the whole thing is a bunch of symbols all brought together. Velázquez, Goya, and this lady, for which Zuloaga made up a whole story. That's reality. It's what you would see in a beach in Valencia. That it's a composition. In fact, he even made up a story. This is this noble Argentinian woman with a Spanish past, and she's called Rosita Gutierrez and everything. No, she wasn't. In fact, she was a madamina in Paris. So you see how modernity goes both ways. The very modern language and composition, the very symbolic and conceptual approach of Zuloaga. This is reality. This is truth. I don't know if we see the difference. But that struggling between reality and truth is the struggle in which modern painting strives. Back to the horses, right? Remember what we said about the horses, the dead horses and everything? This you could see in any beach in Valencia. And it symbolizes a very healthy, optimistic, young, playful country, Spain. In fact, there are paintings of Sorolla painting the horse and the kid, and the horse and the kid are there, and Sorolla with this huge canvas painting in the middle of the beach, there. This, Víctima de la Fiesta. Right now, it's being shown in Hamburg, in an exhibition of Zuloaga that we have there, and I keep getting every day about 10, 20 emails per day of people acknowledging this work and asking things. Because what is this work? This is a reality. Okay, what is this? This is a picador, yeah, sure. It's a Quixote as well, right? Exactly, recalling the Spanish symbol of this guy that threw himself into the windmills out of ideals. Is it Spain? Is it Spain after 98? What is this? That's the exact struggle that these painters symbolize. Sorolla, who was commissioned with the Hispanic Society, the vision of Spain. The most important Hispanic institution outside of Spain commissioned him with a whole cycle. This is his take on Castilla. You can see the whole virtuosistic and almost documentary approach to festivities in Castilla. Back there, Ávila, Zuloaga. This happened 1910, New York, one after another. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. They are all together, but they are all lonely, all praying by themselves, almost crying, this creepy image there, and this guy guarding Castilla. Interestingly, this is also scenery. It's in fact completely flat. You could never see something like that. You could never find something like that. And yet it's true. Because according to Zuloaga, this is how Spain felt. It did look like that, it felt like that. Okay, consequences, Madrid, friend of Sorolla, of course, appointed director of the Prado Museum, Aureliano Beruete, immediately, official Spain. Friends of Zuloaga, Gutierrez Solana. This is the herald of Black Spain. In fact, As much as Zuloaga was fascinated with this black Spain, like García Lorca, for example, Solana, yeah, he was fascinated, but he was also horrified. In fact, Solana started depicting the Spain that killed each other 20 years later during the Spanish Civil War. So he started showing the horrors of a society that eventually would slaughter itself. Okay, we said that we were going to go back to Barcelona and to Quatre Gats, yeah? To the four cats. So, this is an interesting illustration, piso piso, and this is probably one of the 2, 3, 4 important places of history of art in the world, 20th century. And I'll explain why. Do you recognize any of these guys? Probably not, right? Well, there are some people that you know there. Let me introduce you. Quatre Gats, it's a project of a restaurant and cabaret and theater and cultural institution that was brought up by this guy, institution in Barcelona, Pere Romeu. He was, in fact, a waiter, and he made a lot of money through bringing to Barcelona professional sports, Football Club Barcelona, for example, here. Here, these two, the very rich and very talented Catalan painters that founded with him Quatre Gats. And these are all the crew. Let me introduce you. This is Utrillo. This is Nonet, we will see him. Mir, we will see him. Mr. Santiago Rossinyol. Ramon Casas. This, and this, we don't know exactly who he is. And this one, have you recognized him already? No? We will see. We will see. Our dear Santiago Rossinyol, he brought up this formula of the symbolistic landscape in Spain. And he did symbolistic landscape both of the white Spain and the black Spain. Very talented painter, most important, very important cultural figure. He built a modernistic dream of a castle next to the sea, and there he founded the modernistic festivals. The modernistic festivals where most of the great European artists felt and went whenever they were in Spain, and where many of the great important things, music, theater, literature, happened in Europe. In fact, it rivaled any of the big cafes on Montmartre. He brought that next to Barcelona today, by the way, an impressive museum in Sitges, the Cau Ferrat. This was the guy. And he could walk the Andalusian way, very talented. He was a talented painter, more talented poet and journalist. And this is clearly a very black Spain procession landscape. Same guy, same year. This is Mallorca, this is Andalusia. Second in line, our very dear Ramon Casas, the probably most academically talented of the Catalan painters. This portrait is by him. This is by a friend of his. In fact, most of the portraits that we will see will be his portraits. This one is also his portrait. I mean, like his portrait. So here, it's a friend of his. Here, it's Ramon Casas. And you see how he, keeping the same style, can acknowledge the postcard of bullfighting, but also this. Remember how we talked about the dead horses, right? More to follow. Joaquin Mir. Now, here we're talking. Joaquin Mir belongs to the next generation, but he was regarded as a madman back in the day. As a matter of fact, he spent almost 5 years in a mental institution, and funny thing, he wrote saying, well, you see, it's not so bad. It's worse in the Quatre Gats than in the mental institution. This is a friend of his also, Casas. And this is 1900 Joaquin Mir. Of course, we have our little black Spain take here. But this, 1903, what is this? I mean, this is as he used to say, the complete break of the pictorial language. We are breaking all the rules because, as much as he had a very Mediterranean eye, like Sorolla, he thought that we could take things further. Why do we have to paint something? Why don't we just break it? Yes. This is abstraction before abstraction, 1903. This one, by the way, will be coming to us, to Latvia. So, recognize this guy? Yeah, we've seen him at the beginning with Grosvalds. It's Gosset. He was in the center of this. Only thing, he was more an illustrator than a painter, but he illustrated most of the art magazines that in France and in Spain that were diffusing all of these ideas. And he also acknowledges this whole thing. There you go, an illustration by him. And the whole thing, it's so ironic and yet so heroic. See the whole thing recalling the iconographies of St. George, but still the horses are dead, and here this little phrase saying, the king is going to be happy, we have already 17 dead horses. You see how this cartoon by Gosset acknowledges a certain situation concerning Spain itself? Yet again, our dear Isidro Nonell. And as much as Mir had this idea of breaking language, Nonell was about transcending the scene. Transcending the scene meaning the examples that we have from our culture, our gypsies, our bullfighters, or everything, serve as symbols of the human condition. And that transcendence from the local or national symbol to the universal concept is the, how can I say, the path that the great painters of this period follow in order to become some of the most important artists in European history, at least. Here is him. These are gypsies. This is 1897. These are the gypsies that were around Barcelona. And he created a style which was called miserabilism, like the paintings of misery. And it's always gypsies. So he is stealing an icon from Spain and showing through that icon misery. You see how he's playing with us. We've seen all of them in the familiar illustration of Quadregats. You see the melting pot that Barcelona was at that moment, and that, in fact, made Barcelona such an important place for history of art beyond Gaudí, for example. At long last, our dear Anglada Camarasa. Yes, his friend, and this is Gamonal, this is not, but I couldn't find Acasa's portrait. What makes Anglada so powerful? He's very, very, very influential because he is the only one that can walk naturally on both sides. As much as Rossinyol or Casas can acknowledge one of the sides, black Spain, white Spain, and Mir is more about the Mediterranean take, and Nonell is more about the conceptual dark part of symbolism. This guy is able to do everything. You can study him from Sorolla and from Zuloaga. You can also understand him through German symbolism, Klimt, for example. This is white Spain? Really? What is it? It is a folkloric image. But it's the lonely bride. It's called the Bride of Beninament. And yes, it's a folkloric image, but is it meant to be a folkloric image, a picturesque image, or is it already completely modern, floating in the air? Yes, he's doing this, and the same year he's doing this. The granite cellar. The two gypsies here, I don't know if you can barely see the face here. This is a 1907 painting. Of course, Picasso was already doing Demoiselle de Vignon. But Anglada Camarasa, through his experience, you see, he's the only one that is clearly walking both paths. And it's not even about the painting that you get, he can do that in the same painting. Is this black Spain? Is this white Spain? Is this symbolism? Okay, so we're missing someone, right? Yeah, we're missing someone. Who's this? Yes. Someone say there, Picasso? Yeah? Now you recognize him? Huh? Now you see him? The first exhibition of Picasso happened here in Quatre Gats. And he is learning from Monet, Mir, Rossinyol, Casas. And you see that they are learning, or they are participating in the debate held by Spain about how we show a country. Is this fair? Is this reality? Is this true? Yes. This is the end of the path, and this is when this whole concept of black Spain and white Spain becomes universal. What did he show in Quatre Gats back in the day? See, this is depicted by Casas. You see his first trip to Paris. He was, in fact, he went there because Casas and Rossinyol paid for his trip. And there he was received by Zuloaga. This is what he showed in his first Quatre Gats exhibition. Interesting, huh? That his first depictions back there had to do with Spain and bullfights and black Spain and white Spain. As a matter of fact, you can very clearly see the influence of Mir and Casas and Zuloaga, these dead horses, dead horse there, this whole clash with academical painting. Picture this image here. This is 37 years later. And this is the study of the horse of Guernica. Interestingly, that white horse, which is a reality for Sorolla, it's a real horse, in fact, and an optimistic touristic brochure for Spanish official authorities, became a symbol of Spain for Zuloaga by putting it together with the symbol of El Quijote, and eventually became a symbol of the fall of humanity during the very dark years of the Civil War and the anticipated very dark years of the First World War. So that's why the white horse of Picasso that comes from this painting tradition becomes a universal symbol, and that's how picturesque images of Spain, the process in which they are conceptualized, eventually become a very, very, very important part of our common history of art. That this is the world with which Grosvalds and others were so fascinated. So I hope that you have enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, I will be very happy to try and answer them.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for such a wonderful speech and introduction in Spanish art from the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century. And so, do you have any questions in English, in Latvian, and in Spanish, of course?
thank you very much for this wonderful lecture. I was just thinking on this two paths you talked about, Spain and White Spain. A long time ago, I saw an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, which was telling the story about 19th century French painting, like Monet and some others showed here. How they have been influenced earlier by Velázquez and Goya and other painters of the Spanish Golden Age. And now looking at the, especially images you showed of Zuloaga, I was just thinking that perhaps that French tradition was also somehow standing in like providing a kind of a link between 17th century Spanish artists, then 19th century French adaptation, and then like being reconstructed to an extent at least by those painters who had this Paris experience. I don't know whether this could be true to a small extent.
It is a very good point, and it's absolutely true. All of these paintings that look into Spain normally look into Spain from peripheral Spain. Let's say Barcelona is peripheral Spain, Basque Country is peripheral Spain. Ignacio Zuloaga comes from a very old family. They were man-at-arms of the kings, so they had been in contact with nobility for the last 2 centuries probably, and he had a great knowledge of Spanish painting tradition. However, when Zuloaga goes to France, and the first years, he is painting like a French artist, like Courbet or his fellow companions on the Académie de la Palette, Émile Bernard, very close to him, etc. At a very young age, he's already copying El Greco in the Prado Museum, but he doesn't think about El Greco or Goya or Velázquez as a viable language for his painting and the viable things until he goes to France. And this is a very similar process. It's very similar to the process that Gauguin followed. Gauguin goes to exotic lands, to Tahiti, and in order to find some meaning to his painting, because he can't find any more themes there in Paris or there in France. So he's going for something genuine. And the fact that Zuloaga is in France, the moment he turns back to Spain, he realizes how genuine that is. And he realizes because there is a certain fascination by French artists, not only Manet, but Delacroix, and most of the great, Géricault even, and most of the great French artists have this tradition of looking back with certain fascination to the Spanish school of painting. And there's something else. Spanish painting, conceptually, is traditional Spanish painting. Traditional Spanish school is always modern. I mean, like, we have to define here what is modern and what is not modern. Modern is, in this case, anti-classical. Spanish painters have defined themselves as being anti-classical. When you had a very classical approach to painting throughout Europe in the 18th century, Goya came in and took the painting savagely all the way up to Expressionism. When you had a very refined, gentle mannerism in Italy, El Greco came and broke all the rules, and he's fired from the Vatican, and he's chased, and he goes to Spain, and there in Spain he finds in the Archbishop of Toledo someone that finally understands the power of his painting. And that modernity is conceptual. El Greco said to the teacher of Velázquez back in the day, in a very famous dinner that they shared, listen, it's not about how close we are to reality, it's about how close we are to communicating what we are to communicate. And if we have to break the rules in order to make our message clear, we break them. That is El Greco, and that is Picasso as well. I mean, this whole take on Spanish art, it's not only about themes and styles and chromatics and compositions, it's far more. It's an idea that we have to break the rules. We have to break the rules so that the message is clear and powerful. I don't know how many rules did Picasso break in Guernica? He broke them all, all of them. Color, light, composition, everything broken. And yet the message of Picasso was so powerful. More than anything, more than any depiction. And that's what Zuloaga, when he came back to Spain, what he was really looking for. That drive. Zuloaga, whenever you look at his paintings, you realize that it's all fake. It's all made up. Not, even the light, it doesn't make sense. And you look at it and it's like, oh, it looks like Rivera or Goya. It looks like them because he's breaking the rules like them. And that's what he really took from the Spanish school. When Manet goes to Spain and paints this dead bullfighter without a context, floating in the air, I mean, this he takes from Velázquez. Okay? This is why we have this here. This he takes from Velázquez. This neutral background. Why do you want a neutral background? That doesn't make sense. It can't happen like that. Things are not floating in the air. And yet, the portraits of Velázquez, normally, the people are floating in the air. You don't even see their shadows. Why? Because the only thing that matters is their expression. Nothing else. He doesn't even have to finish the background. And this whole concept is not about him bringing forth a certain topic, a certain theme about that. No, no, no. It's far more than that. It's the idea of I will do whatever it takes. And this I will do whatever it takes was true for El Greco, true for Velázquez, true for Goya, true for Zuloaga, true for Picasso. So, I don't know if I've answered more this year.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, very, very great. So I'm really looking forward to this, and you said that the Spanish painters are about the breaking rules. Is it still applicable nowadays, or not so much?
I mean, now painting is about breaking rules. It is about that. I think that it's, and I'm going to say something that is not very politically correct, okay? Okay, so, my take, my call. Spanish painting and great painting, it's an emotional way of communicating things. It always is. It doesn't matter if we know what the theme is. When we have great painting, it immediately connects with us. So we don't need lots of intermediaries. That's why painting was such a powerful persuasion method back in the day when people didn't know how to read. It was mass media. It was convincing through images directly. So the more powerful, the deeper the connection, the better the painting. Contemporary painting, many times, not always, but many times, and in Spain especially, it has this very intellectual approach. The moment we substitute emotion for intellectual approach, it doesn't work so well. So yes, of course, there are nowadays great Spanish painters, and this applies for anything. But sometimes, of course, doing this is very, very difficult. You don't get a money every second year in the Arts Academy. But right now, in Spain in particular, and in the world in general, as much as painting is about breaking the rules, the whole intellectual approach for breaking the rules it's kind of a christen for these kind of paintings. Not only these kinds of paintings, but Goya or El Greco or Rembrandt, I mean, the great painters. So right now in Spain, as much as it's very intellectual, it doesn't happen like that.
But who is now more or less the famous one? No, famous at least few.
No, there are a couple of international very good painters in Spain, I'd say, amongst the most valued artists alive right now. So to give you two very different painters. One could be Barceló, he's an expressionist painter, and he plays with textures and everything. He's quite abstract. He used to be more figurative, but now he's more abstract. And the other one could probably be, to give you like the other scope, Antonio Lopez, which is a hyper-realistic painter, symbolistic, and he depicts empty cities. Very impressive landscapes of empty cities. So those are, I mean, two of the most famous painters right now in Spain. Miguel Barceló, he comes from a very Joaquin Mir environment. He's a great admirer of Mir, so he does this, but in 3D more or less. So this, but in 3D, more or less, and he covers whole surfaces, and it's half sculpture, half painting. It's an interesting painter. Antonio Lopez, whom I had the pleasure to meet and curate. Quite to the contrary, it's like a very obvious city, but it's very unsettling because it's all empty cities and empty people. So I'd say that those are among the most famous, and because people, so how much money does this painter sell for? I'd say that the most powerful ones are those two, let's say those two schools, but of course there are many, many more. Some of them more intellectual or more with a more complex narrative, let's say. And there's this saying in Spanish Royal Academy right now that whenever you don't have to explain your painting, you can sell it for 20,000. If you have to explain it, you have to sell it for 2 million. You see, so this whole approach is true right now. Yeah.
Some more questions, maybe? I have one question. You have seen now the Grosslands exhibition, and you have seen also like his sketches from his trip to Spain in 1913. Your first impressions about how Grosslands saw Spain?
I think that it's really fascinating. Grosslands was incredibly wise for being so young. And whenever you are seeing how he depicts and what he's paying attention to, and afterwards, to say that it's a very luxurious exhibition, the Grosslands exhibition. Not always you have a curatorship in which you have the diaries and the paintings at the same time. I mean, it's really difficult to find something like that, and that's why it's an exhibition in which you learn a lot, not only about Grosslands, but about how painters think and live and breathe and everything, and that's a very, very, very important thing. It's funny how he is still very romantic about Spain. He is very romantic about Spain. And yet he goes to Segovia, and whenever he's depicting Segovia, he even changes his style. And whenever he's depicting Castilla, he's very close to what Gutiérrez Solana, Zuloaga, and everyone is doing. And whenever he's going to Andalusia, the compositions instantaneously, from the very conceptual Castilla, become very romantic. The bridge, Cordoba, the palm tree, as much as he's a very modern painting, of course. So it's, and I was wondering yesterday if this is because he has the sensibility, or his sensibility transforms his compositions, or because he was already very, very, very influenced by the whole projection that Spain was doing. And that's something that I was wondering, if he was really feeling that whole thing, or if he was biased because of all the literature. It was interesting. I did an exhibition in Tallinn 4 years ago, Zuloaga. And there, surprisingly, for me at least, Friedeberg Douglass, their great writer, he wrote a lot about Spain, and because he went to Spain, and all that he wrote about Spain was the comparison in between the Spain that he was seeing and the paintings of Zuloaga. So the fact that these painters are projecting, all of them, Anglada, Sorolla, Zuloaga, in that moment in Paris and throughout Europe. I mean, like you've seen the magazines. Everywhere in Europe, people knew these guys. they were projecting a certain image of Spain, it kind of biased and delivered and influenced the image that he had. But it's fascinating how, especially the depiction of Segovia and the depiction of, and it's beautiful because they are assembled next to each other, so you can really see how he's jumping from one place, and he's close to, or you could think that it's another painter. Everything, the colors, the compositions, the tape, everything. So I don't know to what part it's sensibility or him being very influenced by the image of the Spanish painters and Spanish literature and Spanish musicians, or if it's just a pure sensitive soul that's able to see through this kind of thing and transform its own technique. So yes, I think it was really, really, really interesting. In fact, yesterday I saw the show, and my first idea was to include several Grosswalds, but it would have been, yeah, in order to show how that whole thing transformed. But of course, we just had 1 hour, not 3. Yes, it is really, really, it would give for another lecture, in my opinion, this whole thing, yeah.
Thank you. And if there are no more questions, then thank you again. And I hope you all enjoy this evening here at the museum. So thank you, and one question.
Quería preguntar si puede mostrar su correo electrónico, por favor.
Sí, sí, cómo no. Un segundo. Okay. This is not with a capital C. Huh? Okay. So if you want the names of the paintings and sizes and everything. Okay, thank you so much.